She had just enough love to feed her baby, but not enough money to buy the milk that would keep her alive. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Victoria Sterling stood frozen at the checkout counter, her fingers trembling around a dented can of baby formula. The thin plastic of her wallet lay open in her palm, exposing a few crumpled bills and a scatter of coins that barely added up to anything meaningful. Behind her, the line stretched longer with each passing second, carts rattling, impatient sighs cutting through the stale supermarket air. Her 6-month-old daughter whimpered softly from the carrier strapped to her chest, the sound small but sharp enough to pierce through Victoria's composure. She bounced gently, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed. "You're okay, Lily. Mama's got you." But the numbers on the screen told a different story. The cashier cleared her throat, her voice polite but firm. "You're short $8.42. The words landed heavier than they should have. $8 might as well have been 800. Victoria swallowed hard, heat rising to her cheeks as she glanced at the growing line behind her. A man in a business suit checked his watch with exaggerated impatience. A woman shifted her cart forward with a sharp nudge. No one said anything, but the silence felt louder than judgment. Victoria forced a small nod, her hands moving slowly as she reached for the can. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I'll just put it back." Her fingers tightened around the formula for a brief second, as if letting go meant more than just returning an item. It meant admitting she couldn't provide. Again, the baby let out a soft cry, and Victoria's chest tightened. She turned slightly, trying to shield her daughter from the world, from the stares, from the quiet humiliation pressing in from all sides. Then a voice, calm and low, broke through the tension. "Add it to mine." Victoria blinked, unsure she heard correctly. She turned her head slowly. The man standing behind her didn't look like someone who needed to speak twice. He wore a dark coat that fit too perfectly to be off the rack. His posture was relaxed, but there was something deliberate in the way he stood, as if he occupied space without ever asking for it. Daniel Hayes didn't repeat himself. He simply stepped forward and placed his card on the counter. The cashier hesitated for half a second, then nodded and began scanning the rest of his items along with Victoria's. Victoria shook her head quickly, instinct kicking in. "No, I can't. I mean, it's okay. I'll figure something out." Daniel didn't look at her right away. His gaze stayed on the card reader as he tapped once, the transaction processing in a quiet beep. Only then did he glance toward her, his expression steady, almost gentle. "It's already taken care of." There was no pity in his voice, no expectation, just a simple statement, as if this moment required nothing more than that. Victoria hesitated, her throat tightening as she searched for the right response. I don't even know how to thank you." Daniel gave a small shake of his head. "You don't have to." He reached for his bag as the cashier finished, his movements unhurried. For a brief second, his eyes flickered toward the baby, noting the tiny name printed on the hospital bracelet still loosely wrapped around her wrist. "Lily." He said nothing about it. Victoria clutched the bag of formula like it was something fragile, something temporary, something she might wake up from. "Really?" she whispered, her voice softer now. "Thank you." Daniel nodded once. "Take care of your baby." That was all. No questions. No lingering conversation. He turned and walked toward the exit, disappearing into the late afternoon light as if he had never been there at all. Victoria stood still for a moment longer, the noise of the store slowly returning around her. She adjusted Lily against her chest, pressing a gentle kiss to her head. "We're okay," she whispered again, though this time, it felt slightly more real. What she didn't see was the camera mounted quietly in the corner above the register. What she didn't know was that Daniel Hayes had already noticed more than he let on. And what she couldn't possibly imagine was that for him, this moment wasn't over. It had just begun. The evening air felt colder than it should have as Victoria Sterling stepped out of the grocery store, the automatic doors sliding shut behind her with a soft mechanical sigh. She adjusted the thin blanket over Lily, tucking it closer around her tiny body as the baby shifted and let out a sleepy murmur. The parking lot stretched, wide and dim under flickering streetlights, cars coming and going in quiet waves, each one carrying people who did not have to think twice about something as simple as milk. Victoria walked carefully, one hand gripping the plastic bag, the other steadying the carrier against her chest. The weight of the formula felt heavier than it should have, not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. Relief mixed with something else she could not quite name. Gratitude, yes, but also a quiet ache that settled deep in her chest. She reached her car, an aging sedan with faded paint and a door that only opened if you pulled the handle just right. It took her 2 tries before it clicked open. She placed the bag gently on the passenger seat, then eased herself into the driver's seat with a tired exhale. For a moment, she just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead without really seeing anything. The image replayed in her mind. The calm voice, the simple gesture, the way he had not made it a moment she needed to survive, but just something that passed. Take care of your baby. The words lingered. Victoria glanced down at Lily, who had finally drifted into a deeper sleep. Her small face relaxed in a way that made everything else feel distant. We got lucky today, Victoria whispered softly, brushing a loose strand of hair away from the baby's forehead. The engine sputtered slightly before turning over, the familiar uneven hum filling the quiet space. She pulled out of the parking lot slowly, careful with every movement, as if the fragile balance of the day might break if she moved too fast. Across the street, unnoticed, a black sedan remained parked beneath the shadow of a tall oak tree. Inside, Daniel Hayes sat in the back seat, his gaze fixed on the dim glow of the grocery store entrance. He had not planned to stay. That had not been part of his routine. His days were usually mapped down to the minute, meetings stacked with precision, decisions made with sharp clarity. Yet here he was, watching a stranger drive away, as if something about that moment had unsettled the rhythm he relied on. His phone rested in his hand, the screen already open. A single message thread waited for his input. He hesitated. For a fraction of a second, then typed, "Send me the security footage from Register 3. Timestamp 6:42 p.m. The reply came almost instantly. "Yes, sir." Daniel leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable, but his mind anything but still. It was not the $8. It was not even the situation itself. It was the way she had held on to her dignity even when everything else was slipping. The way she had tried to refuse help she clearly needed. That detail stayed with him. He tapped the screen again. Also run a search. Name Victoria Sterling. Cross-reference with local employment records. Another pause. Then he added one more line. Discreetly. The city lights reflected faintly against the window as he looked out, his reflection staring back at him. For a man who had built an empire on calculated moves, this felt different. Less like strategy, more like instinct. Across town, Victoria pulled into a narrow apartment complex, the kind where the paint peeled at the edges and the stair railings creaked under pressure. She turned off the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the quiet ticking sound as the car cooled. Carefully, she gathered the bag and stepped out, holding Lily close as she made her way inside. The hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and something forgotten, but it was familiar. It was hers. Inside the small apartment, she set the formula on the counter with a gentle touch, as if it might disappear if handled too roughly. She moved through her routine slowly, methodically, warming a bottle, checking the temperature against her wrist, all the small actions that made up her world. Lily stirred as the bottle touched her lips, instinct taking over as she began to feed. Victoria watched her, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. "You are going to be okay," she said quietly, though this time, the words carried more weight. Not certainty, but possibility. Somewhere else in the city, a video file began to download onto a secure device. A simple moment, captured from above. A woman, a child, a quiet act of kindness, and a man who, for reasons he could not yet explain, could not let it go. Morning arrived too quickly, carried in by pale light slipping through the thin curtains of Victoria Sterling's apartment. The air held a quiet stillness, broken only by the soft hum of an old refrigerator and the faint rhythm of Lily's breathing from the crib beside the bed. Victoria stirred before her alarm could sound, her eyes opening with the kind of alertness that came from responsibility rather than rest. For a moment, she lay still, listening, grounding herself in the fragile peace before the day began. Then reality returned in small pieces. Bills stacked on the kitchen counter. A shift at the diner that barely covered rent. The constant calculation of what could wait and what could not. She pushed herself up, careful not to wake the baby, and moved through the apartment with practiced quiet. The floor creaked in familiar places. The The coffee maker sputtered as it struggled to brew something that resembled energy. Victoria wrapped her fingers around the chipped mug, letting the warmth settle into her hands as she glanced toward the counter. The can of formula sat there, untouched since last night. For a second, she simply looked at it, not with relief this time, but with something closer to disbelief. It was still there. It had not disappeared overnight. She let out a slow breath she did not realize she was holding. Okay, she whispered to herself. One less thing today. Lily stirred then, a soft sound that quickly turned into a gentle cry. Victoria set the mug down and crossed the room in 2 quick steps, lifting her daughter with ease that came from repetition and love. "Good morning, sweetheart," she murmured, pressing her cheek lightly against the baby's head. "We made it through another night." As she prepared the bottle, her movements were steady, but her thoughts drifted back to the grocery store. The man, Daniel. She did not even know if that was his full name. Just a voice, a face, a moment that felt strangely out of place in her life. People did not usually step in like that. Not without a reason. Not without expecting something in return. Yet he had asked for nothing. That was the part she could not quite understand. Across the city, Daniel Hayes stood in front of a wall of glass that overlooked the skyline, the early sunlight reflecting off steel and concrete in sharp lines. His office was quiet, untouched by the rush that would soon fill it. On the large screen behind him, the security footage played. In a continuous loop. A fixed angle. A checkout line. A woman holding a can of formula as if it carried the weight of the world. Daniel watched without interruption, his attention fixed on details most people would miss. The hesitation in her hands. The way she shielded the child instinctively. The moment she chose dignity over desperation. He paused the video with a slight movement of his finger. Victoria Sterling. The name now had a face, a story beginning to take shape through the data his team had already gathered. Part-time server. Recently terminated from a bookkeeping position. No listed partner. 1 dependent. Address confirmed. Daniel exhaled slowly, absorbing the information without visible reaction. Numbers and facts usually told him everything he needed. This time, they only raised more questions. A soft knock interrupted the silence. "Come in." His assistant stepped inside, tablet in hand. "You asked for a background summary. It is all here. There is nothing unusual. Just difficult circumstances." Daniel nodded once, taking the tablet, but not looking down immediately. His gaze returned briefly to the paused image on the screen. Victoria standing there, caught in a moment most people would never notice. "That is usually where the important details are," he said quietly. The assistant hesitated. "Would you like us to proceed further?" Daniel finally glanced at the report, then back at the screen. His decision formed without effort, as if it had already been made the night before. "No assumptions," he said. "I want to see how she handles things on her own." A brief pause. Then he added, "But make sure she has the chance to do it." The assistant nodded, understanding more than the words alone suggested. As the door closed, Daniel turned back toward the window, the city stretching endlessly in front of him. Somewhere within it, a woman was starting her day, unaware that a single moment had shifted something beyond her control. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel found himself stepping slightly outside the structure he had built, following a decision that was not entirely logical. Back in the small apartment, Victoria sat by the window, feeding Lily as sunlight warmed the edge of the worn carpet. The world outside moved as it always did. Cars passing, people rushing. Nothing extraordinary. Yet something felt different, though she could not explain why. She adjusted the bottle gently, watching her daughter with a quiet focus. "We are going to figure this out," she said softly. And somewhere between uncertainty and hope, the day began. The afternoon light slanted through the diner windows, casting long golden lines across the worn booths as Victoria Sterling tied her apron with practiced hands, her movements quick but careful, like everything in her life now. The low hum of conversation filled the space, mixed with the clatter of plates and the steady rhythm of a place that never really stopped moving. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:30 in the afternoon. Halfway through her shift. Not fast enough. "Table 4 needs a refill," her manager called out without looking up. Victoria nodded immediately. "Got it." She grabbed the coffee pot and moved through the narrow aisle, her steps light but efficient, weaving past customers and chairs with instinctive precision. Her smile came easily, but it did not reach her eyes. "Can I top that off for you?" she asked, her voice warm, controlled. The man at the table barely looked up as he pushed his cup forward. "Yeah. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just routine." Victoria poured carefully, making sure not to spill a single drop. Small mistakes had consequences she could not afford. As she moved back toward the counter, her mind drifted again, uninvited but persistent. The memory from last night still lingered, not fading like most moments did. It stayed sharp, unusual, out of place. She shook it off gently, focusing on the present. Orders, timing, balance, survival. Across town, Daniel Hayes sat in a quiet conference room, though the meeting in front of him had lost his full attention minutes ago. Voices filled the space, discussing projections and quarterly growth, but the numbers blurred together, lacking the clarity they usually held for him. His fingers tapped once against the table, subtle but deliberate. "Daniel." A voice pulled him back. He looked up, meeting the expectant gaze of his executive team. "Your thoughts?" He paused for half a second, then responded smoothly. "Proceed with the revised strategy. Adjust the timeline by 2 weeks." The answer came easily, almost automatic. It was correct. It always was. The meeting continued, but his focus shifted again, not to the charts or the figures, but to a quieter question forming beneath it all. Opportunity. Not given, not forced, just made possible. Back at the diner, Victoria balanced 2 plates in one hand and a tray in the other, moving toward a booth near the window. A young couple sat there, laughing softly, their world contained within their own conversation. She placed the plates down gently. "Anything else I can get for you?" The woman smiled. "No, this is perfect. Thank you." Victoria nodded, a small genuine warmth flickering for a brief moment. "Enjoy." As she turned away, her pocket vibrated faintly. She almost ignored it. Personal calls during shifts were not encouraged. But something about the timing made her hesitate. She stepped briefly behind the counter, pulling out her phone. An unknown number. She frowned slightly. For a second, she considered letting it go. Then she answered. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end, just long enough to feel intentional. Then a calm, familiar voice. "Victoria Sterling?" Her breath caught before she could stop it. "Yes." "Who is this?" Another brief pause. Not hesitation. Precision. "This is Daniel." The noise of the diner seemed to fade, not completely, but enough to shift her awareness. Her grip tightened slightly on the phone. "Daniel, from the store?" "Yes." His tone remained steady. Not intrusive, not overly familiar, just present. Victoria glanced around quickly, as if someone might be watching, though no one paid her any attention. "How did you get my number?" she asked, her voice quieter now. There was no accusation in it, just confusion. "I asked," he replied simply. No apology, no explanation layered with excuses, just truth, delivered calmly. Victoria exhaled slowly, her thoughts racing faster than her words. "Is everything okay?" she asked, unsure why that was the question that came out. "Yes," Daniel said. A slight pause followed. "I wanted to make sure you and your daughter are doing all right." The question hung there, simple but unexpected. Victoria looked down at her hand, at the faint indentation left by the cheap plastic of her phone case. No one had asked her that in a long time. Not like this. Not without needing something in return. "We are okay," she answered softly. A beat passed. Then Daniel spoke again. "Good." Another pause. Not empty. Measured. "I would like to offer you an opportunity." The words landed gently, but they carried weight. Not pressure. Not demand. Just possibility. Victoria closed her eyes for a brief second, steadying herself against something she could not yet define. Outside, the world kept moving as it always did. Inside, something had just shifted again, quietly, without warning, and this time, she knew it would not fade as easily. The noise of the diner rushed back in all at once, as if someone had turned the volume up without warning. But Victoria Sterling remained still behind the counter, the phone pressed gently against her ear while Daniel's last words echoed in her mind. An opportunity. The word felt unfamiliar in her world, like something meant for other people, people who did not count coins under fluorescent lights or measure their days in tips and small survival wins. She swallowed softly, grounding herself before speaking again. What kind of opportunity? Her voice was steady, but quieter now, as if she did not want the moment to break under too much sound. On the other end, Daniel Hayes did not rush his answer. A position, he said. Temporary, to start. Something aligned with your experience. Victoria's brows drew together slightly. You do not even know my experience. There was no accusation in her tone, just simple truth. Daniel's response came without hesitation. You worked in bookkeeping before. You left recently. The words landed gently, but they carried precision that made her pause. She turned slightly, lowering her voice further. You looked into me. It was not a question. Yes, he replied. No defensiveness. No attempt to soften it. Just honesty. Victoria exhaled slowly, her grip on the phone loosening just a fraction. Part of her wanted to end the call right there. It would be easier, simpler. But another part of her, quieter but stronger, told her to listen. Why? She asked. The single word held more weight than anything else. There was a brief silence on the line, not empty, but thoughtful. Because I saw how you handled a difficult moment, Daniel said. And that tells me more than a resume. Victoria looked down at the counter, tracing a faint scratch in the surface with her fingertip. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Not about strength. Not about how she handled anything. It was just a grocery store, she murmured. It was not just that, Daniel replied. His tone remained calm, but there was something firmer beneath it now. You chose dignity when it would have been easier not to. The words settled into her, quiet but steady. For a moment, she did not know how to respond. A voice called out from across the diner. Victoria, order up. She turned her head slightly. Coming. She called back, then brought the phone closer again. I am at work, she said, almost apologetically. I understand, Daniel replied. I'm not asking for an answer right now. Another pause. But I would like to meet. In person. When you are available. Victoria hesitated. Her instinct told her to be cautious. Life had taught her that unexpected offers often came with conditions hidden beneath the surface. I cannot afford to take time off, she said honestly. You would not need to, Daniel answered. I can come to you. Somewhere convenient. She glanced around the diner again, at the chipped tables and the constant motion, at the life she knew and understood. It felt safe because it was predictable. This was not. Why are you doing this? She asked again, softer this time. The question lingered, more personal now. Daniel did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter than before. Because someone once gave me a chance when I did not expect it. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, absorbing that. It was not a full explanation, but it was enough to feel real. I get off at 6, she said slowly. There is a coffee shop across the street. Daniel responded without hesitation. I will be there. The call ended shortly after, not abruptly, but cleanly, as if both of them understood that anything more would only complicate what had already begun. Victoria lowered the phone, staring at the dark screen for a second longer before slipping it back into her pocket. Her heart beat a little faster now, not from fear, but from something she had not felt in a long time. Possibility. She picked up the next order and moved back onto the floor, her steps steady, her focus returning to the rhythm she knew. But beneath it all, something had shifted again. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to change the direction of where this day might lead. The clock above the diner door clicked to 6 with a soft mechanical shift, and for the first time all day, Victoria Sterling allowed herself to pause, her hands resting lightly against the edge of the counter. As the last of the customers filtered out into the fading light, her body ached in the quiet way that came from hours of constant motion, but her mind felt sharper now, focused on something waiting just beyond the routine she had followed for months. She untied her apron slowly, folding it with care before setting it aside. Small habits mattered. They kept things from falling apart. See you tomorrow, her manager called from the back without looking up. Yeah, Victoria replied, her voice steady. See you. Outside, the evening air carried a cooler edge, the sky painted in soft shades of orange and fading blue as the day gave way to night. The coffee shop across the street glowed warmly through wide windows, its light inviting but unfamiliar in a way that made her hesitate for just a second before stepping forward. She adjusted Lily's blanket, holding her a little closer as she crossed the street carefully, each step measured. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee and baked bread wrapped around her, a contrast to the grease and noise she had just left behind. Conversations murmured softly from scattered tables. A quiet place. Not rushed. Not demanding. Victoria scanned the room, her eyes searching without fully knowing what she expected to find. Then she saw him. Daniel Hayes sat near the window, his posture relaxed but composed, as if he belonged anywhere he chose to be. He was not looking at his phone, not distracted. His attention lifted the moment she stepped inside, as though he had been waiting without impatience. Victoria approached slowly, her steps steady despite the unfamiliar weight of the moment. "Hi," she said, her voice calm but cautious. Daniel stood immediately, a small gesture that felt intentional. "Victoria." He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Please." She sat carefully, adjusting Lily in her arms as the baby stirred briefly before settling again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable, but it was filled with awareness, like both understood that something important was beginning to take shape. A server approached, breaking the stillness. "Can I get you anything?" Victoria shook her head lightly. "Just water, please." Daniel nodded once. "The same." When the server left, Victoria looked at him directly for the first time since sitting down. "You said you had an opportunity." She did not soften the words. She did not dress them up. Direct. Honest. Daniel inclined his head slightly. "I do." He reached into a slim folder beside him and placed it gently on the table, sliding it toward her without pushing. "It is a bookkeeping position. Short-term to start. Flexible hours." Victoria glanced down at the folder but did not open it yet. "Why flexible?" she asked. Daniel's gaze shifted briefly toward Lily, then back to her. "Because you have responsibilities that matter more than any schedule." The answer came without hesitation, and it landed differently than she expected. Not like an assumption, more like recognition. Victoria rested her hand lightly on the folder, still not opening it. "And what is the catch?" she asked quietly. Daniel's expression remained steady. "There is no catch." She held his gaze for a moment longer, searching for something hidden beneath the surface. "There is always something," she said. Daniel considered that, then gave a small nod. "Then the only thing would be this," he replied. "I expect honesty, and I offer the same." The simplicity of it made her pause. No long explanation, no complicated terms, just a boundary, clear and even. Victoria finally opened the folder, her eyes scanning the first page. The numbers, the structure. It felt familiar in a way that tightened something in her chest. This was something she knew, something she had been before everything shifted. "I have not done this in a while," she admitted softly. "Skills do not disappear," Daniel said. "They wait." Victoria let out a quiet breath, her fingers brushing lightly over the paper. Outside, the last light of day faded completely, leaving the reflection of the room visible in the window beside them. Two people from different worlds, sitting at the same table, connected by a moment that had not ended at a checkout line. She looked up again, her voice quieter now, but steadier. "When would this start?" Daniel's answer came without delay. "Whenever you are ready." And for the first time since this conversation began, Victoria did not feel like she was standing on uncertain ground. It was not solid yet, but it was there. Victoria Sterling did not answer immediately, and the silence that followed felt different from before, heavier but not uncomfortable, as if it carried the weight of a decision that could quietly change everything. Her fingers rested on the edge of the folder, tracing its clean lines while her thoughts moved faster than her expression revealed. She looked down at Lily, who slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the conversation unfolding above her. That small, steady breathing grounded her. It always did. "I cannot promise I will not make mistakes," Victoria said finally, her voice honest, without hesitation. Daniel Hayes watched her carefully, not interrupting. "I'm a little out of practice, and my schedule is not predictable." Daniel nodded once, as if he had expected that answer. "Mistakes are part of any process," he said calmly. "What matters is how you respond to them." Victoria held his gaze, measuring the words, testing them against everything life had taught her. They did not feel like empty reassurance. They felt measured, intentional. "And if I cannot keep up?" she asked. The question came softer now, closer to something personal than practical. Daniel leaned back slightly, his expression unchanged but his tone more grounded. "Then we adjust," he replied. "This is not about pushing you beyond what is reasonable. It is about creating something that works." The simplicity of that answer settled into her more than she expected. No pressure, no hidden urgency, just space. Victoria glanced down at the folder again, then back at him. "Why me?" she asked once more. But this time the question carried less doubt and more curiosity. Daniel did not look away. Because you did not ask for help when you needed it, he said. And that tells me you will not take advantage of an opportunity when it is given. Victoria let out a quiet breath, almost a small laugh, without humor. You are basing a lot on one moment. One moment can reveal a pattern, Daniel replied. The answer came without force, but it stayed. Victoria shifted slightly in her seat, adjusting Lily as the baby stirred before settling again. The movement gave her a second to think, to feel the weight of everything in front of her. The diner, the late nights, the constant calculations. And now this. Something different. Something uncertain, but not impossible. She closed the folder gently, her decision forming not in a rush, but in a quiet alignment with what she needed and what she could allow herself to believe. Okay, she said. The word was simple, but it carried more than agreement. It carried trust, even if only a small amount. Daniel gave a slight nod, acknowledging the choice without making it bigger than it needed to be. We will start tomorrow, he said. I will have everything prepared. Victoria blinked once. Tomorrow. There was a hint of surprise now, not resistance, just adjustment. Only if you are comfortable, Daniel added. We can begin with a few hours. No pressure. She considered that, then nodded slowly. Tomorrow is fine. The words felt steadier as they left her. Outside, the night had fully settled, the reflection in the window now showing more of the room than the world beyond it. Victoria caught a glimpse of herself in the glass. Tired, worn, but not as uncertain as before. Daniel followed her gaze briefly, then stood, signaling the natural end of the meeting without forcing it. I will send you the details, he said. Victoria stood as well, holding Lily close as she adjusted the strap of the carrier. Thank you, she said, and this time the words felt different. Not just gratitude for what had happened before, but for what was about to begin. Daniel inclined his head slightly. You are welcome. There was no extended goodbye, no unnecessary words, just a quiet understanding that something had shifted into motion. As Victoria stepped out of the coffee shop and into the cool night air, she paused for a brief second, looking up at the sky as if grounding herself in the moment. Tomorrow would not be the same. That thought should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like something opening, slowly, carefully, but undeniably real. The night passed slower than usual, not because anything was wrong, but because something had changed, and Victoria Sterling could feel it in the quiet spaces between each breath and every small task she completed before finally closing her eyes. Morning came with a softer light, the kind that filtered gently through her curtains instead of forcing its way in, and for the first time in a long while, she woke up not with dread, but with a quiet awareness that this day would be different. She sat up slowly, careful not to disturb Lily, and let the stillness settle around her for a moment. No rushing thoughts, no immediate pressure, just a pause. Then reality returned, but it felt lighter. Not gone, just easier to carry. Victoria moved through her routine with the same care. As always, preparing a bottle, checking the temperature, adjusting the small blanket around Lily as the baby blinked up at her with sleepy curiosity. We have somewhere new to be today, she whispered, her voice soft but steady. The words sounded unfamiliar, but not impossible. Across the city, Daniel Hayes stood in his office, reviewing a set of documents laid out neatly across his desk. Everything was prepared with precision. A workstation arranged. Access granted. A schedule designed to accommodate without overwhelming. He glanced once at the time, then closed the folder with a quiet sense of completion. This was not a major decision in the scale of his world, yet it felt more deliberate than many that were. Back in her apartment, Victoria adjusted her reflection in a small mirror by the door, smoothing down her hair and straightening the simple blouse she had chosen after careful consideration. It was not new. It was not perfect, but it was clean, and it was hers. She took a breath, then another, grounding herself before stepping outside. The drive felt shorter than usual, though the roads were the same. Traffic moved steadily, the rhythm of the city unchanged, but her focus stayed forward, not drifting into worry the way it often did. When she finally pulled into the parking lot of a building she had only seen from a distance before, she paused. The structure rose clean and sharp against the sky, glass reflecting the morning light in a way that felt almost distant from her world. She turned off the engine and sat still for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Okay, she whispered to herself. Just one step at a time. Lily stirred softly as if responding, and Victoria smiled faintly before stepping out of the car. Inside, the lobby was quiet but alive with movement. People passing with purpose, voices low and controlled, everything structured in a way that felt unfamiliar but not unwelcoming. Victoria adjusted Lily's carrier and approached the front desk, her posture straight but cautious. "Hi," she said politely. "I am here to see Daniel Hayes." The receptionist looked up, her expression shifting briefly with recognition before settling into something more neutral and professional. "Of course," she replied. "He is expecting you." That alone made Victoria pause for half a second. Expecting her. Not waiting. Not surprised. Just prepared. She nodded and followed the directions given, each step forward carrying a mix of uncertainty and something steadier beneath it. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped inside, watching as the numbers climbed higher with each passing second. The quiet hum of the movement filled the space, giving her just enough time to steady her breath again. When the doors opened, Daniel was already there. Not seated behind a desk. Not occupied with something else. Standing. Waiting. "Good morning, Victoria," he said, his tone calm, unchanged from before. Victoria stepped forward, her grip adjusting slightly around Lily as she met his gaze. "Good morning." There was no grand introduction, no overwhelming welcome, just a simple beginning, grounded and real. Daniel gestured toward the space behind him. "Everything is ready. We will take it one step at a time." Victoria nodded, and as she crossed the threshold into a place she had never imagined walking into, she realized something quietly important. Nothing about this felt like being rescued. It felt like being given a chance to stand on her own, with just enough support to make sure she did not fall. The first step inside felt quieter than Victoria Sterling expected, not because the place lacked movement, but because everything seemed controlled, as if even the noise knew where it belonged. Her eyes adjusted slowly, taking in the clean lines, the muted tones, the way people moved with purpose but without rush. It was different from the diner. There, everything demanded attention at once. Here, everything felt intentional. Daniel Hayes walked beside her, not ahead, not behind, matching her pace without making it noticeable. "We will start simple," he said. "No pressure to get everything at once." Victoria nodded, her gaze shifting briefly toward the workstation prepared near a large window. It was not hidden in a corner. It was placed where light reached it. That detail did not go unnoticed. "This is where you will work," Daniel continued, gesturing lightly. "Everything you need is already set up." Victoria stepped closer, her fingers brushing the edge of the desk, as if confirming it was real. A computer, organized files, a chair that did not wobble when she tested it gently. Small things, but they mattered. "You can take your time getting familiar," Daniel said. "I will be nearby if you need anything." Victoria glanced at him. "You are not going to watch over everything?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her tone. Daniel gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "No, I trust you to figure things out." The answer settled differently than she expected. Not supervision, not control, trust. She nodded once, then set her bag down carefully, adjusting Lily's carrier beside the desk. The baby stirred lightly, her small hands moving instinctively before settling again. Victoria checked the strap, making sure everything was secure, then turned her attention to the screen in front of her. The system was familiar enough to recognize, but updated. Cleaner. Faster. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard for a moment before she began. Numbers appeared. Entries aligned. At first, her movements were cautious, each action deliberate. She double-checked everything, then checked again. Minutes passed. Then more. Slowly, something shifted. The hesitation began to fade, replaced by a rhythm she had not felt in a long time. Not rushed, not forced, just steady. Across the room, Daniel stood near the glass wall of his office, his gaze occasionally lifting from his own work to observe, not intrusively, but attentively. He noticed the details others would miss. The way her shoulders relaxed after the first set of entries balanced. The slight pause before she corrected a minor discrepancy, without prompting. The quiet focus that did not seek attention. He did not interrupt. He did not step in. He simply let the process unfold. Time moved differently in that space. Not counted in tips or orders, but in completed tasks and quiet progress. After a while, Victoria leaned back slightly, her eyes scanning the numbers on the screen. Everything matched. No errors. No gaps. She let out a slow breath, one she did not realize she had been holding. A small accomplishment, but it felt larger than that. Daniel approached then, his presence calm but noticeable. "How does it feel?" he asked. Victoria looked up at him, then back at the screen. "Familiar," she said softly. A pause. Then she added, "I forgot how much I missed this." Daniel nodded once. "It shows." There was no exaggeration in his tone, just observation. Victoria glanced at Lily, who remained asleep, undisturbed by the quiet rhythm of the room. "I was not sure I could still do it," she admitted. Daniel's expression remained steady. "You did not lose it," he said. "You just did not have the chance to use it." The words settled into her, simple but grounding. Victoria turned back to the screen, her posture straighter now, her movements more assured. The uncertainty had not disappeared completely, but it no longer led. It followed. And for the first time in a long while, she was not just getting through the day. She was building something within it. Something small. Something steady. Something that felt like it could grow. The hours passed without Victoria Sterling noticing in the way she usually did, where every minute dragged and every task felt like something to survive rather than complete. Here, time moved differently. It followed her focus instead of fighting it. The soft tapping of keys became steady, almost rhythmic, as numbers aligned and records balanced one after another. She did not rush. She did not need to. Each entry felt like placing something back into order, not just on the screen, but somewhere deeper she had not realized was unsettled. Lily stirred gently beside her, a quiet sound that pulled Victoria's attention away from the monitor for a moment. She turned immediately, her movements instinctive, checking the blanket, adjusting the strap, her hand resting lightly against her daughter's back until the small movement settled again. "It is okay," she whispered softly. "We are right here." When she turned back to the screen, the numbers were still there. Waiting. Not disappearing. Not overwhelming. Just steady. Across the room, a few employees passed by, their conversations low and brief, but more than one glance shifted toward Victoria's workstation. Not obvious. Not intrusive. Just curiosity. A new face. A different presence. Daniel Hayes noticed it as well, though he did not react. He remained at his desk, reviewing documents, but his awareness extended beyond the pages in front of him. He understood how environments worked, how people adjusted to change. He also understood that the way something was introduced mattered as much as the thing itself. He had not announced her. He had not explained. He had simply created space. And now he watched how that space held. A soft knock came at his office door before it opened slightly. His assistant stepped in, her tone respectful but direct. "There have been a few questions," she said quietly. Daniel did not look up immediately. "About the new hire," she clarified. Daniel closed the folder in front of him with a measured motion, and the assistant hesitated briefly. "Some are unsure about the process." Daniel finally met her gaze. "Then let them observe," he said. "Clarity does not always come from explanation." The assistant nodded once, understanding enough to leave it there. Back at her desk, Victoria completed another set of entries and paused, her eyes scanning for any imbalance. There was none. She leaned back slightly, her shoulders easing, not from exhaustion, but from a quiet sense of control returning. That feeling was unfamiliar after so long without it. She reached for her water, taking a small sip before glancing toward the window. The city stretched out below, distant but real, a reminder that the world she had been struggling through still existed. But she was not standing in the same place within it anymore. Daniel approached again, his steps quiet enough not to break her concentration until he was close. "You have been working for a few hours," he said. Victoria checked the time instinctively, her brows lifting slightly. "I did not realize." "That is usually a good sign," Daniel replied. She nodded slowly, then looked back at the screen. "I think I am starting to remember how this works." There was a hint of something lighter in her voice now. Not confidence fully formed, but the beginning of it. Daniel observed her for a brief moment before speaking again. "We can stop here for today," he said. Victoria blinked once, almost surprised. "Already?" He gave a small nod. It is better to build consistency than to push too far too quickly. She considered that, then closed the program carefully, making sure everything was saved properly before turning fully toward him. "Thank you," she said again. But this time the words carried something new. Not just gratitude. Respect. Daniel inclined his head slightly, acknowledging it without drawing attention to it. Victoria stood, adjusting Lily's carrier once more, her movements steady, her posture different from when she had first walked in. As she prepared to leave, she glanced back at the desk, at the screen now dark, at the space that had held her focus for the past few hours. It did not feel temporary. It felt like something waiting for her to return. And for the first time in a long while, leaving did not feel like stepping away from something she had to endure. It felt like stepping away from something she wanted to come back to. The drive home felt quieter than usual, not because the city had changed, but because Victoria Sterling carried something different with her, something steady that did not disappear the moment she stepped away from it. The streets moved the same way they always did, traffic lights shifting from red to green, cars passing without notice, but her hands rested on the steering wheel with less tension than before. Lily slept peacefully in the back seat, her small breaths soft and even, untouched by the shift that had taken place. When Victoria pulled into the apartment complex, the familiar sight of worn stairs and faded paint greeted her again, but it no longer felt like the only place her life could exist. It felt like one part of it. She gathered her things carefully, lifting Lily with practiced ease, and made her way inside. The hallway still smelled faintly of old carpet, and the lights still flickered slightly, but none of it pressed down on her the way it usually did. Inside the apartment, she set her bag down on the small table and paused, just for a moment, letting the quiet settle around her. Then she moved, continuing her routine without hesitation, warming a bottle, adjusting the temperature, holding Lily close as the baby woke and began to feed. "We did something new today," she whispered softly, her voice carrying a hint of something lighter. "And we are going to do it again." Across the city, Daniel Hayes remained in his office long after most of the building had emptied, the quiet around him uninterrupted, the city lights now reflecting against the glass in soft patterns. A file rested open on his desk, but his attention was not fully on it. Instead, he looked at a different screen, one that displayed a simple summary. Hours worked. Tasks completed. No errors flagged. He did not need more than that. It confirmed what he had already observed. Consistency. Focus. Integrity. The door opened quietly, and his assistant stepped in once more. "The team has adjusted," she said. "There are fewer questions now." Daniel nodded slightly. "Good." She hesitated, then added, "They noticed her work." A brief pause followed. Daniel leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful but composed. "That matters more than explanations," he said. The assistant gave a small nod before stepping out. Again, leaving the room in silence. Daniel turned his gaze back to the screen, but not to review the numbers again. Instead, he let the moment settle. This had not been about solving a problem. It had been about recognizing something that did not fit into the usual structure. And now, it was beginning to take shape on its own. Back in the apartment, Victoria finished feeding Lily and gently placed her in the crib, her hand resting lightly on the edge as she watched the baby settle into sleep once more. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. She moved to the small table and sat down, her eyes drifting to the folder she had brought home. Slowly, she opened it again, this time not with hesitation, but with intention. The numbers, the structure, the clarity of it all felt different now. Not distant, not out of reach, just waiting. She traced a line of text lightly with her finger, then leaned back, her shoulders relaxing in a way they had not in a long time. There was still uncertainty ahead. She knew that. Nothing had been magically solved, but something had shifted into place. A starting point, a direction. Victoria closed the folder gently and looked around the small apartment, seeing it not as a limitation, but as a place she could carry forward from. Somewhere else in the city, Daniel stood by the window, the reflection of the skyline stretching endlessly before him. He had built his world on structure and control, on decisions that followed logic and precision. Yet this had not followed that pattern. And still it worked. He let out a slow breath, his gaze steady as the city moved below. Sometimes, the smallest decision did not just change a moment. It changed the direction of everything that followed. The next morning did not feel like a continuation of struggle, but it did not feel easy either. and Victoria Sterling noticed that difference the moment she opened her eyes and sat up in the quiet of her apartment. The weight was still there, but it no longer pressed down the same way. It rested differently now, balanced by something she had not felt in a long time. Direction. She moved through her routine with steady focus, preparing Lily's bottle, checking her bag twice, then once more, not out of anxiety, but out of care. Small details mattered more now. They felt connected to something larger than just getting through the day. When she stepped outside, the air carried a sharper edge, the kind that woke her fully as she crossed the parking lot and settled into her car. This time, she did not pause before starting the engine. She did not need to convince herself to go. She simply did. The building stood the same as yesterday, tall and reflective, but it no longer felt distant. It felt reachable. Inside, the movement of the lobby no longer pulled her attention in every direction. She walked with clearer steps, her posture more grounded, her eyes no longer searching for where she belonged. She knew, at least enough to keep moving forward. Daniel Hayes was already at his desk when she arrived, reviewing a document with quiet concentration, but he looked up as she approached, as if he had been aware of her presence before seeing her directly. "Good morning, Victoria," he said. "Good morning," she replied, her voice steady, carrying less hesitation than the day before. There was no need for further exchange. No formalities. She moved toward her workstation naturally, setting her bag down, adjusting Lily's carrier, then turning her attention to the screen without delay. The system welcomed her back without resistance. The numbers, the structure, the flow of information all felt more familiar now. Not because they had changed, but because she had. Her hands moved with more confidence, her decisions quicker, her corrections more precise. She no longer paused at every step. She trusted her process. Across the room, the atmosphere had shifted as well, though subtly. The glances that passed her workstation were no longer just curious. Some carried quiet acknowledgement. Others moved on without pause, as if her presence had already become part of the space. Daniel noticed that too. He did not need confirmation. The environment was adjusting. Not because he had instructed it to, but because it recognized consistency when it saw it. Midway through the morning, a small discrepancy appeared on Victoria's screen, a set of numbers that did not align as expected. Yesterday, she would have paused longer, double-checking every line before moving forward. Today, she leaned in slightly, her focus narrowing, her mind working through the pattern. Instead of retreating from it, she traced the entries back, one by one, her fingers moving with quiet precision. A misplaced digit. Small. Easy to miss. She corrected it, then ran the sequence again. Balanced. Complete. Victoria exhaled softly, not from relief, but from confirmation. She could still do this. Not just at a basic level, but with care and accuracy. Daniel approached without interrupting her flow, stopping just close enough to observe the result. "You found it," he said. Victoria nodded once. "It was small. The important things often are," he replied. She glanced at him briefly, then back at the screen. "I almost missed it." Daniel shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "You noticed it." The distinction settled quietly between them. It was not about perfection. It was about attention. Victoria leaned back slightly, her shoulders relaxed, her posture steady. She was not trying to prove anything. She was simply working. And that made all the difference. Outside the window, the city continued its constant motion, unaware of the quiet shift taking place within a single office. Inside, something stronger than chance was forming. Not fast, not forced, just consistent. And for the first time in a long while, Victoria was not just reacting to life. She was shaping her place within it. By the end of the week, the routine no longer felt new. And that was what made it meaningful, because Victoria Sterling was not walking into uncertainty anymore. She was stepping into something she had begun to understand, something she could rely on. The mornings came with purpose, not pressure. The small apartment still held the same walls, the same worn furniture, but it no longer felt like a place she was stuck in. It felt like a place she was moving forward from. Each day at the office built quietly on the last. No sudden changes, no dramatic shifts, just steady progress. Numbers aligned, reports completed, patterns recognized before they became problems. Victoria no longer hesitated before making decisions. She trusted what she knew, and when she did not know something, she learned it without fear. Lily adapted too, her small presence becoming part of the space in a way no one questioned anymore. A quiet rhythm formed around them, natural and unforced. One afternoon, as sunlight stretched across the office floor, Victoria finished reviewing a set of records and paused, her eyes scanning the final column one last time. Everything balanced. No corrections needed. She leaned back slightly, not in relief, but in recognition. This was no longer something she was trying to hold together. It was something she had already built into place. Daniel Hayes stood a few steps away, observing without interruption, as he had done from the beginning. He did not need updates. He saw the results. "You are consistent," he said simply. Victoria looked up, meeting his gaze with calm steadiness. "I am learning," she replied. Daniel gave a slight nod. "You moved past learning," he said. "Now you are applying." The distinction was subtle, but it mattered. Victoria glanced back at the screen, then around the space that had once felt unfamiliar. It no longer did. "I did not think I would get here this quickly," she admitted. Daniel's expression remained composed. "You were already capable," he said. "You just needed the right conditions." Victoria let that settle, not as praise, but as truth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them was no longer filled with uncertainty. It was filled with understanding. Outside the window, the city moved as it always had, unaware of the small shift that had taken place within one life, within one decision that had started with something as simple as standing in line. Victoria gathered her things slowly at the end of the day, her movements no longer rushed, no longer driven by the need to keep up, but guided by the awareness that she would return, that this was not temporary. As she adjusted Lily's blanket and lifted her gently, she paused for a second, looking at the desk, the screen, the place where she had rebuilt something she thought she had lost. Not given back, not handed to her. Rebuilt. Daniel stepped closer, his presence quiet but steady. "We will formalize your position next week," he said, "if you are willing." Victoria turned toward him, her expression calm, but her eyes holding something deeper now. "I am," she said. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. Daniel inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the answer without adding more to it. He did not need to. The decision had already been made long before the words were spoken. As Victoria walked toward the exit, the reflection in the glass caught her again, but this time, she did not see someone trying to hold everything together. She saw someone who had found her balance again. Someone who had stepped forward, even when it would have been easier to step back. Outside, the air carried the same cool edge, the same movement of the city, but it felt different now, not because the world had changed, but because she had. And somewhere behind her, Daniel remained where he was, not stepping into her path, not taking credit for what had happened, but understanding something quietly important. He had not changed her life. He had simply made space for her to change it herself. And sometimes, that was the only kind of help that truly lasted.